My name is Bruno Simao. I'm from BSA Law. I'm a property attorney. I focus predominantly in the commercial space, not necessarily commercial properties, but deal making, deal structuring businesses, making businesses work. That's why I work a lot with property investors. Property investors approach property from a business perspective, and property practitioners like estate agents do the very same thing. So my focus for estate agents isn't just about training estate agents on the day-to-day operational things, how to fill in an OTP, how to fill in a mandate, how to have a conversation with a seller, how to approach certain problems. What I do for estate agents particularly is I make sure that their businesses function, and I make sure that they're able to operate successful businesses that make their day-to-day functions a lot easier. So I've got a team of people, and they would help with conveyancing, and they would help with evictions, they would help with everything of the sort. But it's the business components sometimes that are lacking when it comes to running businesses. And this isn't just an estate agent thing. It's throughout South Africa. We are a country full of entrepreneurs. We have so many entrepreneurs passionate about starting their own businesses and making a difference. The problem is there's a difference between entrepreneurship and basically being employed by yourself, being self-employed. Because if you simply just create a job for yourself and you pay yourself for the job that you've created, I'm sorry, guys, but that isn't running a business. And I'll explain why in a second. The problem with that is all that you're doing is you're making yourself your own boss, but you're not scaling a business. You're not creating new opportunities. All you have are these two hands. And if these two hands can't perform the job for some reason or another, you're going to get stuck and you're not going to be able to actually run a successful business. So this is where, if you look at the screen now, this is where we start having a look at different concepts. So these quotes, for example, are things for people just to take home with them. I want you guys, as I go through these slides, to pick any one of these quotes, and if it's something that touches you, if it's something that you feel is important to you, please, try and remember it, write it down. It's it's important to connect yourself to an idea. And that's what Nicolene was saying. Everything that she speaks about implementing, how important it is. It's exactly that. Knowing is very different to doing. And you can attend as many webinars as you want, but unless you're able to actually do, unfortunately, you're going to stay stuck. So the idea behind today on how I'm going to approach it is, as an estate agent, have you ever closed a great deal and then tomorrow it feels like you're right back to square one? And now you're canvassing, you're looking for deals all over again. Now, the idea behind today is to move away from the hustling and to actually move towards building momentum and structuring yourself in order to be able to get momentum in your business. Now, the first problem is what I like to call the transaction trap. Now, this basically means that a person is so focused on working in the business as opposed to on the business. So you're an agent, you're used to using these two hands to work in the business. You go out, you find properties, you go out, you find buyers, you connect the buyers, you broker the deals, you speak to the estate agents, to the conveyancers, you basically do everything from A to Z. The problem is you're stuck in the transaction. Now, if you want to run a business, you need to be able to have long-term systems. So systems, things that can be followed by almost anyone, not just you. Systems where if a new employee comes on board, you would actually be able to get this employee to follow these systems in order to be able to execute almost the exact same function as you would. Legal structures. Where are your legal structures? Are you protected? And by legal structures, I don't mean, oh, do you have a company? Oh, I've got a company. Okay, I'm all good. I'm sorted. I mean legal structures with everything. How do you have conversations with your employees? How do you have conversations with your partners, co-shareholders, senior agents versus junior agents? any other staff member? What about your administrative staff, your support staff? How do you have these conversations? Your own landlord, if you're renting offices, where's your legal structure? Because we've seen situations where people unfortunately land up in really tight spots because they haven't considered legal as an important aspect. And unfortunately, then they land up either in a fight with their shareholder, they land up in employment issues where the employees pack up and leave and take staff members with them and take clients and sellers and listings with them. It land up in trouble with their landlords, for example, where now all of a sudden they've created this hype about the space that they occupy, where the entire neighborhood knows that they're at that space and they're used to seeing them there. And then overnight, you don't have the space anymore and you need to go work from your house, and it impacts your business. It impacts where you meet your clients. People start thinking, especially with smaller areas where your clients know your brand, your clients know where you're located. So all these things from a legal structuring perspective are absolutely crucial. And then when Nick Lean comes in, it's about also the strategic vision. And she speaks about this in a lot of her courses, where you have to create that vision and then a mission and then the different strategies to be able to achieve those. And if you don't have this long-term vision, I can promise you're not going to have any legal structures in place. Because as soon as you take one step back and start asking yourself the question about where I want to be and how do I want to get there, all of a sudden you start realizing the importance of making sure that your structures are properly in place. Now, from a structuring perspective, clarity of role, legal structures, and strategic systems. Now, clarity of role, this is a question that you need to ask yourself. Who are you? Are you more comfortable doing the sales and you don't want to do anything else, and that's all you want to do? Because that's not a bad thing. It really is not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with being self-employed. That is running the business and actually making sure that you have a salary at the end of the month, and that's it. You don't need to hire other people. You don't need systems. You don't need anything else. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you want to run a business, clarity of the role, you need to ask yourself, are you building this business? Now, to build a business, it's more than just about you. It's actually about making sure that if you hire staff members, your staff members are in place. If you use AI to complete certain functions, you've got those systems in place as well. So clarity of the role, you have to ask yourself this: how comfortable are you with what you're doing at the moment? Is it a business that you're running, or are you simply self-employed that you create a job for yourself? And no one asks themselves this, unfortunately, because they assume as soon as they start their own agency, they're business people. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Remember, that's the first question. Now, the second question: if you decide that you are in fact running a business, what is your legal structure and does it allow for scalability, right? Compliance is not an issue that I'm too worried about now for today's discussion, but please keep it in mind. Your structure has to be compliant. But asking the question, if your business is properly structured and is it scalable? Why is that important? If you're creating an asset of value, and you are, because estate agencies, one of the biggest values that estate agencies offer is goodwill. People love the brands. People love the brands either in the smaller areas or they love the bigger national brands. It doesn't matter. But there's a reason why franchising in the estate agent space is such a big thing. It's because of brands. And if you're creating your own brand, or you're working with somebody else's brand, or you're franchising and you're part of a bigger brand, remember that that goodwill that you're creating in this franchise is actually quite important, because it's at this juncture you get to ask yourself the question: if I ever need someone to buy in, if I ever need a strategic partner to align with me, and please never ever discount that, because if you discount the possibility of strategically aligning with people because it's your business and only yours, I can guarantee you, you will not grow this business very fast. The strategic alignments are crucial, and it doesn't have to be by giving away shares in your company, but always keep in mind that alignment and collaboration are one of the most important things. But let me go back to structure. So what does it mean to say, is your business protected? Remember, you're running a business. Businesses take risks. Why would you want to run the business in your own personal name? Because if you're an agent and you're trading as an agent, and remember, we're professionals. You're a property practitioner. I'm a legal practitioner. We're practitioners, we're professionals. We're bound and guided by certain ethical rules and guidelines. If something goes wrong, we can't hide away from it. We can't say, well, my company did it, so sue my company. Unfortunately, the reality is that you have to protect yourself as an individual, because as a professional, certain things will always fall on you. So the protection of your structure is very important, because certain things you're able to keep in your structure, and certain things, unfortunately, you cannot use the structure to defend. So your professionalism and your ethics is something that you're always going to be responsible for. But things, for example, like debt, like taking chances, getting invested in a deal, all these sort of things are things that you can do through your company, where you will not be personally liable for those decisions. Now, no one is saying that you can go out and trade recklessly. That's obviously not permissible, and that's only going to get you into trouble. But there is a risk component that's managed through our company legislation in South Africa that allows you as a business person to go out and take certain calculated, reasonable risks without having to carry the potential liability or damage that might be associated with it. So just think about that. Do you have your company in place? Is it compliant? Do you have your company in place to a degree? Is your bookkeeping in place, your accounting in place, your financial statements and records? Are they all in place? Because they will also need to be in place if you do want to align with someone, because that's the first thing somebody will look at if they ever decide to join you in your practice. They will want to understand what your practice is doing, how it's running. And if you ever build an asset of value and you decide to sell your agency, guess what they're going to be looking at? So these legal structures, including accounting structures, have to be in place. And then strategic systems is something that Miguel will obviously speak more about, but it's very important because they do tie into legal structures. And I'll on the next slide, we'll discuss some of these more strategic things. So if you look at the slide now, there's basically four components to this. So you want to structure your legal foundation. I've just spoken about this. That's separate personality from yourself. Your business has a separate personality. Now, I think that's something that everyone needs to understand, but I think it is something that everyone understands. Now, how do you do this? You use companies, right, to run your business. Trust is something that you're going to use for your personal estate planning. So it's not necessarily a conversation for today, but trust me when I say that holding the shares in your name, as an example, especially if they're very valuable, probably not the best idea, because your name and your personality can always be exposed to risk. A trust, on the other hand, if administered properly, can never be exposed to risk, but there has to be value behind it. And my general rule of thumb is that if you have an estate worth over 3.5 million Rand, it's probably a good idea to start asking yourself the question, should I consider a trust, right? Now, the next thing, plan for resilience, not reaction. Prepare for deal failures, and you mitigate around that. Again, business, systematic, strategic. If you're strategic enough to realize that certain things can go wrong, you place your legal structures in place to make sure that at least there's a barrier or a buffer between what goes wrong and how you're actually going to be able to manage it. So this strategy is about actually starting to plan ahead. You want to mitigate risk. Now, what does it mean to mitigate risk? It's exactly that. It's to ask yourself the question, what potentially can go wrong on a daily basis? For example, you've got staff members. What happens if your staff members resign? How do you mitigate that risk? Have you thought about that systematically? Have you thought about that legally, right? What if your staff members resign and they take a client with them? Have you thought about that systematically? Have you thought about that legally? Will you enforce the claim? Will you be able to stop them? Will you even want to stop them? Do you even have contracts in place that give you the option? Do you realize, for example, that with many contracts, especially when it comes to restraining people from doing something, sometimes even if the contracts are very difficult to enforce or very expensive to enforce, what we sometimes find is the psychological um, the psychological bindingness of the contract actually counts more sometimes. People that sign a contract and have integrity and sign it knowing what the contract says and agree to a certain term, or sometimes psychologically bind themselves to adhering to that contract. So just think about that. Sometimes just getting the people to sign the contract is enough without you actually having to go out and trying to enforce the contract. Now, think partnership, not just production. Going back to what I was saying earlier, and you see how all these things tie in. Production, what do I mean? Now, production is you running a deal, closing a deal, making the commission. The partnership is looking for your conveyancers, your tax practitioners, originators, legal advisors, all the like, getting into JVs, referral agreements, co-listing. Good partnerships, good partners can amplify your business. I can guarantee you this. Now, a lot of you would then ask me, no, but hold on a second. We've got all these connections. We've got the conveyancer. We've got all these guys. Is it true partnerships? Do you want to start having a conversation about what value are you adding to your clients, and how can this team effort actually add this value? When you're having conversations, for example, with your clients, and the conversations over capital gains comes up, are you able to have this conversation with them? What about VAT? What about the VAT consequences? What about selling the property as a going concern and zero rate as an example? Where are those conversations having? Because together as a group, you'll see that all these mortgage bond originators, I work with mortgage bond originators, but not just, I've got a client who wants a bond, there you go. I actually bring them into the picture. I start having strategic conversations with them on how we can actually work with these type of clients in order to increase their affordability. I will take one client that I know has the potential, because I've identified the potential of them buying several properties, not because they necessarily have a high salary, but because I've seen certain things in these investors that give me the impression that they're good property investors. They need good deals. So you're already looking for advice on certain commercial aspects of the property investment space. Do you have a team member for that? Do you have a team member that can comment on things like student accommodation? What about zoning? Do you work with someone that does zoning and can come and help you speak about zoning so you can turn one single property into a multi-let property, as an example? Do you have a tax person that's able to speak to the seller or speak to this purchaser and discuss the different options with them? Do you have a lawyer, for example, that does deal making, whose primary function is to sit and look at certain problems and come up with solutions when ordinarily there are no solutions? That's what I mean by strong partnerships. It's going above just the production that we're used to now, about taking a sale from A to Z, and really going into the detail in between A and Z. And position yourself as a deal maker, not just a facilitator. So it's exactly what I'm speaking about now. Everything I've mentioned now is about you making a deal happen, because you're identifying weaknesses in the structure and you're finding a way of addressing these issues. The only way you can do that is by being a deal maker. Everything that I spoke about, it's not just about, I've got a property, here's a purchaser, connect the two, and now it's out of my hands, because we live in a cutthroat environment. And unfortunately, if that is going to be your approach, it is going to be difficult for you to compete. So just a few final words before I do need to go, is for agents, start acting today like the person you want to be tomorrow. Tell this to everyone, absolutely everyone. Today, you start acting the way that you want to be tomorrow. So if you're not an agency owner, it doesn't matter. Everything I said counts, because you are going to be acting and thinking and creating systems for yourself. Everything that you do from this day is like you're going to be an agency owner tomorrow or top agent tomorrow. Absolutely everything is crucial. This isn't just about an agency owner running their business and creating scale. This is about every single agent here running their business and creating scale for themselves. So start thinking like a business and try set yourself apart, like I mentioned earlier. Don't just be a facilitator, be a deal maker. Agency owners, obviously a lot that I said applies to you, but same principles. Realize, and this is very important because it connects to the first one, realize that your agents are your assets. Let's be real. And you're in a space where you rely heavily on agents. You rely on them. Why? Because these agents have to be on the ground. We can't just use AI to sell properties. It's not, and as much as you might have staffing issues and, but agents did this to me, they did this to me. Unfortunately, you have to address that problem. Be on the side that finds a solution, not on the side that finds a problem. There are ways, and there are ways of investing in these agents because they are your assets. And one day, hopefully, they'll be your partners. But for today, they are your assets. And I know it's difficult. I've also gone through candidate attorneys that, okay, some have come, some have gone. It's very different. It's very difficult, but you have to invest time and energy into this. And I know Nicolene has a fantastic course on this. I've sat through it. I believe there were 2 modules that I sat through on this, and it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, about the engagement with agents, about how to retain them, about how to differentiate between the different agents. So very, very important. Again, set yourself apart. Same thing as I said before, you're an agency. Make sure that you offer value adds above and beyond what other agencies are offering their clients.